With great power comes great responsibility.
Compromise where you can. Where you can't, don't. Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right. Even if the whole world is telling you to move. It is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say no. You move.
Never step onto the battlefield of ideas unprepared. Before you enter the fray, you need a plan. And there's no better place to get one than right here on Tactics with host Caleb Colquitt. The Situation Room goes live now on News Radio 1440.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for being here with us on Tactics, where speech isn't love, tolerance. Wow, I got my own show's motto wrong. How pathetic is that? Where speech isn't violence, tolerance isn't love, and disagreement isn't hate. So thank you so much to the program, whether you're watching us on YouTube, on Facebook Live, on Twitter, Twitch, Periscope, or Mixer. We're now on Mixer. So this is actually our first show being broadcast there. If you're joining us just now from the Mixer audience, we appreciate you being with us here in the Situation Room regardless of how you're joining in. And it's that time of year again. I know that everybody has been eagerly anticipating, if you're a political junkie like I am in the state of Alabama, it is the time that our legislature is back in session. And with that, just like we did last year, we're going to try to make this a weekly thing. Hopefully we'll be able to do this every week. We have a very special guest on, just like we did last year, to help keep us informed. Our lady on the ground, as it were, the one and only Becky Gerritson of Eagle Forum, Alabama. Welcome to the program, Becky.
Thank you for having me on again. It's crazy. We are back to a new year, and it's going to be a busy one, I think.
Yeah, it really does feel like it was, just yesterday that we stopped doing these segments because the legislative session was gone. And now here we are back again with a whole new slate of bills, all new stuff to talk about. And one of the things that, because you said there's not a whole lot of news going on down there today, correct?
Yes, they adjourned at 9:30 this morning.
Well, anytime the government's doing less work, I'm in favor of it personally. So that's good. That's good news. They haven't screwed anything up yet so far, hopefully.
Right. Nothing has passed both houses yet, which is good. We're only on day 2, but I think next Tuesday that trend will begin to change.
So you think that they're going to be kicking up steam and they'll be, going full force on Tuesday?
Yes. So this session opened on February 4th, this last Tuesday, and we are excited because one of our bills, which is a resolution declaring pornography as a public health crisis, pornography happens to be the fuel that is fueling all of this human trafficking. Mm-hmm. And there are many other reasons why it is a public health crisis, but it so quickly passed unanimously out of the Senate on Tuesday. So we were really shocked that happened so quickly. Now, hopefully on next week, we will have the same thing happen down in the House, but we will be the 16th state to declare pornography as a public health crisis once it passes both houses.
Well, great. It's good to see that the legislature was actually able to come together on that. And, you probably didn't know this, but actually earlier this very week, I think it was on Monday's show, we aired an interview that we did with Dr. James Butterfield from WeFightPorn.com that was talking about all of the negative effects of pornography, both on individuals and their personal health and their personal psychology, but also some of the net effects of it being so prevalent on society as a whole.
Yes. Before this summer, I went to a global human trafficking workshop in Washington, D.C. And before this, I really didn't know how pervasive pornography was and what a detriment it was to our society. And I'm just blown away at how prevalent it is. And since then, have done a lot of research on the harms to our society. And like you said, to individuals, to families, even to our economy. It's hurting in a lot of areas. And it's time that we address this at a community level. It's gotten so big that it is out of control, and people on an individual level can't seem to stop their addiction. And Caleb, I just want to share with your listeners, one of the things that I share when I talk about this topic, and I do speak to different groups, is that I have a friend who's a bus driver here in Wetumpka, Alabama, right outside Montgomery, small town. And I explained, after I got back from this conference, and I said, oh gosh, did you know this? And she said, Becky, I have third graders on my bus watching porn on the way to school.
My God.
I was shocked by that. And then right after that, I talked to one of the sponsors of our bill, and he said he has a friend whose wife has a friend who's a bus driver in Hoover. They were filming sex acts on the bus, and she's had to break up sex acts on her bus. And I'm thinking, we are in the Bible Belt. This is not LA County, California. This is happening in our backyard on the way to school, and we have got to protect these children and these families from the harm that this is going to do to them.
Well, and that's the thing. Of course, the porn on the bus story that you were telling us about with the third graders, that's obviously like, I can't even imagine that, because those are kids that, if they're third graders, 8, 9 years old?
Yes.
And the thing is, these two stories are not unconnected, because you're talking about the other one where they're from very young kids having to break up sex acts on the bus. Where do you think they saw that? Where do you think they even knew how to do that? Because I know, speaking from personal experience, and granted, I was a very sheltered child, but at 10 years old, that was the furthest thing from my mind. I didn't even like girls until I was 13, 14. And so, I just can't imagine a child's innocence being scarred from such an early age that they're wanting to engage in stuff like that from the time that they're that young.
Yeah, and it has such an impact on the brain, and you probably talked about this on Monday.
We got real deep into the psychology and the brain scans, the science behind it, how it functions like an addiction, that kind of thing.
Yes, and it especially with these brains that are not developed yet. And for many of these children, this is their first exposure to sex at all. This is sex education for them, and what they are learning, this is not the 1950s, 60s kind of porn, soft core stuff. Mainstream porn is violent. It is very aggressive. It is horrible. And that is what these poor young children are being traumatized by. And then, being kids, this is how their brains are. They go and act out what they see. That's how they're wired. And so we have a huge rise of child on child sex abuse. And of all of the children, minors that are sex offenders, 20% of them are under the age of 10.
My gosh.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Now, Becky, you've known me for a really long time, and you know that I tend to lean even more libertarian than you do. But here's the thing, because I get into discussions and arguments with some of my libertarian friends about this, and they'll say, well, the thing is as long as you, let people do what they want to do, don't pass any legislation about it. Here's the thing about that, though, because I understand their argument. I see where they're coming from. And the difference is, and this goes to what you're talking about, is imagine if we treated cocaine or even a non-illegal drug like alcohol this way. You could buy beer on the internet, and the only thing you have to do to prove that you're of age is to click a button that says, I'm 18 years old.
And you don't even have to buy it. It's free.
Right. Absolutely free.
Yeah.
Doesn't take a credit card, nothing. Literally, if you have a web browser, you have access to it.
Yes.
I mean, if you're over 18, I get the argument. I get the libertarian, the err on the side of freedom argument. I understand that. But there has to be some kind of regulation, because there is no way as a society, people from all spans of the political walk, including libertarians, would say, well, we shouldn't be letting a 9-year-old buy a can of beer. Well, this is far more harmful. And, and actually, from a scientific standpoint, far more addicting. Yes. And we're making it to where they can access it in their room to where their parents don't even know, and they could go on and nobody knows about it. There's no threshold for them to pass. And that's why I think that there needs to be something done about this.
Yeah, well, this is why this resolution is so important, because there is a push at the national level to have a public health crisis declared federally. But by getting these states to start passing them, each state on its own, it will be easier to get it at the federal level. But what we are seeing, what is happening online, it's illegal. This porn, mainstream porn, is obscene. It is illegal. And we are pushing the Justice Department to start upholding the obscenity laws. And that would take care of the majority of this. But since the Obama administration, he dismantled the task force on pornography, and it's just run amok.
See, I never knew that.
Yes. And so what is online now is illegal, should not be happening. What you could find streaming on Netflix and all the, Prime and all that is illegal. It should not be done, but no one is holding the Justice Department accountable. So that's what this resolution is going to pave the way to do. And the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, which we've been working closely with, they are working with the Justice Department to try to beef up those task forces and, get them back in service and start prosecuting these producers and consumers of porn.
Well, and that's another thing, too, that people don't understand. A lot of the laws that we do have on the books currently are not being enforced.
Yes.
Because there was a study done, I want to say it was about a year ago, that they did a survey of pornography, and they found that a staggering percentage, I want to say, it was definitely in double digits, of the porn that you find online actually does include minors.
Yes.
Which is totally illegal in any state.
Yes. Yes.
So there's that, and then there's the sex trafficking. Like you said, people don't realize it's not just that the pornography programs the brain to desire people that are younger and younger and that kind of thing. But there's also the aspect of there is sex trafficking that goes on to produce this stuff. Yes,
and that is actually a large part of it, is that they are trafficked victims, and they have someone standing behind the camera basically saying, you better look like you enjoy this, or you are not getting your next meal or your next drug fix. Because a lot of those victims get into drugs because it's the only way they can handle dealing with this horrible, horrible life that they have. And they are, at that summit, they talked so much. They even had some porn stars there, past former porn stars, talking about how they were made to produce this stuff and be in these and act like they liked it. But of course they didn't,
Sure.
They were being raped. And, so it's just a horrible thing. And I wish we didn't live in a society where we even had to address this, but it's time for us to stand up for these victims and, these innocent children, especially too, who just stumble upon something horrible and then it captivates them. And then next thing you know, you have, a 7-year-old who's addicted to pornography.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, the way that this, because we talked a lot about this with Dr. Butterfield, the way that it reprograms the brain, it literally creates pathways to where, just like anything else, it creates a dopamine drop that is equal to that of cocaine.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
So people feel like, just like they do with cocaine, they have to have it. It really is a medical addiction, just like any other that we could talk about. But one last thing I wanted to ask before we move on to some other things, because I do think this is an incredibly important topic. With this resolution specifically, it doesn't have any actual legal, it doesn't grant like extra legal authority or create some kind of policy. It's basically just a symbolic resolution, an important one, but a symbolic resolution that says that we're going to work towards this, correct?
Yes, it's like a public announcement that this is a real issue and we need to start paying attention. And it will provide, and you can see within the resolution, it will pave the way to future policy and legislation dealing with this same kind of thing. But yes, you're right. It doesn't have any teeth, and it's not calling for any specific policy measure, but it's an educational tool.
Well, I think it's a good thing. It's a good first step. And it also, and this is what I like about it, a lot of people just would rather we not even do resolutions because, like you said, they don't have any real legal implications. But here's the reason it's important. It allows us and it gives us another tool to help hold our elected officials accountable. Because if they don't take action on this, or they vote against a bill that would address this in the future and say, well now hang on, you voted for a resolution that said we want to deal with the problem. Why is it now all of a sudden you're against the solution, the policy that we come out? And hopefully that won't be an issue for our legislature, but I think that it's a positive step in the right direction. It's definitely not exhaustive or all-inclusive, but it's a good first step.
Yes, definitely. So we are excited that it passed on the first day of session, and so we will see what happens, going forward with the House and their resolution. It should not be an issue, but I hope the next time we talk, I have good news about that.
Excellent. Well, we'll certainly be looking forward to that next Thursday as well. By the way, we're talking to Becky Gerritson of Eagle Forum, Alabama. And one thing that I wanted to ask you about, because like you said, there's not a whole lot that went on today, and that's to be expected because they just opened the legislative session for this year. I want to ask you, what do you forecast? What are some bills that have already been pre-filed? Like, what can we look forward to this legislative year?
Well, this will be, especially, Eagle Forum really works on a lot of policy that affects the family, which can be anything from taxes, all the way down to pornography or gambling. But I know the ones that we will specifically be watching. There is a bill that is called HB 35. It's called the Girl Act, and it will not allow biological males to participate in female sports in school. And so that one, I can already see the opposition. They actually had a little protest out there on the first day. This whole transgender mess. So I think that one is going to be an interesting one to watch. It will probably be in committee next week. Again, that was HB 35 from Representative Pringle. We are expecting a couple of different lottery bills to come through. They've not been pre-filed yet. But
yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, we heard that, and several. We'll have lottery bills, and then we'll also probably have the gaming compact with the Indians. Of course, Eagle Forum's position on that is we're against that, just of what it does to families and how it really isn't an economic benefit for the state.
Well, and that's the thing. Even if you take the family aspect or the moral aspect out of it completely, that's a bad deal. And that's the case that I made. The compact that they have proposed basically gives them a monopoly on gambling in the state. So I've said, let's say you're for gambling, want Alabama to have full casino-style gambling. That's a bad one to be in favor of, because then that means that only one source gets to give all the gambling in the state of Alabama. So that's just a bad bill all the way around.
Yes. Now, medical marijuana will take a lot of oxygen out of the room. That has not been pre-filed yet, so I don't know what the conditions are that they are going to allow for medical marijuana use, but of course we'll be front and center watching that one. Then there is a female genital mutilation. You remember that from last year.
Right.
That is actually being carried this year by Representative Hall on the Democrat side.
Okay.
And it was in committee yesterday, and it passed out of committee. So I was very happy to see that. And they may debate it on the floor on next Tuesday, or it may just sit in the basket for a long time like it has in the past. This will be the third or fourth year that they have brought it up, and let's hope it gets passed this year.
Okay. Now, one thing I wanted to revisit that you mentioned earlier was the Girl Act, and I did a segment on that not long ago. I actually opposed the bill as well, but actually...
No, I like the bill. We are for the bill because...
No, I know.
Okay.
Let me voice why I'm against it.
Okay.
I like what the bill is trying to do, and I'm 100% on board with its intent. I think the reason that it's a problem, and I could support it if it were amended, is the way that it reads is that a person has to participate in a sport based on the gender that is on their birth certificate. The problem with that is there are over 30 states, including the state of Alabama, that allows a court to go back and retroactively adjust the gender on your birth certificate.
So I have good news for you.
Okay.
There is a second bill. They've already amended it.
Oh,
and
good.
That was HB, I think you were looking at HB 20. Well, there's HB 35 now, which have said your biological sex at birth, which is a big difference. So that's a good change. Now, there's more changes that we are wanting to have amended throughout the bill. You don't want to change it in the title because the Girl Act, the word gender is where the G comes from. So it's a great acronym. Don't change the acronym. But within the bill, the language everywhere where it says gender, that needs to be struck, and it needs to be changed to biological sex, because that is a medical term that does not change. But gender is used now for however you're feeling. Yeah. And so we've already talked to the sponsor about that, and he's trying to make those changes. We'll see if he refiles it or if they just make that change during the committee, do those amendments during the committee.
Yeah, well, see,
meeting.
that was the thing. I 100% was on board with what was the intention of that law, what they were trying to do. I saw all kinds of legal pitfalls reading that thing.
Yes, yes, I agree. But I think that's going to be taken care of. So
Okay, good. And hopefully the representative that is sponsoring that, hopefully we'll get all that cleaned up, and I would appreciate that personally. I don't think that that's a huge problem in the state of Alabama, but still, it's something that we need rules on the books to know how we're going to deal with it ahead of time, so we're not
Yes.
caught with our pants around our ankles trying to figure out how
Right.
we're going to sort through all that.
I agree.
I know that this isn't probably one that Eagle Forum Alabama deals with directly, but I wanted to get your take on this one as well, because it's one of the more interesting bills, and I think I mentioned it to you when I was talking to you earlier on the phone. There is actually right now by Representative Pouncey Robertson of Opelika a lifetime concealed carry permit bill. So
Yes, and a consolidated database for yes. I took a look at that after we talked. At first view, it looks okay to me. Tell me your thoughts.
Okay, so here's the thing. It's not as good as just going to constitutional carry, which is the bill that was
Yes.
brought up last year that we talked about
Yeah,
this?
I think it was for the last couple of years. But yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it's-
last year there was one.
Yeah, I hope that I would rather, of course, is go to that, and
Yes.
we could. There's no reason for us to get off on that tangent right now, but with the bill that we're dealing with that we know has already been pre-filed, it's a lifetime license for $200, which is relatively cheap because I mean, in just 8 years you've already paid for it. If you live 8 years afterward buying a lifetime concealed carry, then you've already saved money. But the thing that I think that is probably even more important is that Aaliyah is going to take over and would streamline the background check. So basically, they would be the ones handling that at the state level, which, I mean, presumably, and maybe you know more about this than I do, but presumably what that would do is it would make you getting your permit even faster. And another thing that it would help with is that acts as your background check for your gun purchase. So as long as you have a concealed carry
Nice.
permit on you and you go to purchase a gun, that acts as your background check. They don't have to do a secondary background check.
Well, that's interesting. And you know, one of the things that it says in there too is you can get a 1-year license, 5-year license, or lifetime.
Right.
Right. So it doesn't have to just be lifetime, but
we technically already have a 1 in 5
yes.
year. This would just be adding the lifetime, which I have a feeling though, and this is just my prediction, that the Sheriff's Association is going to be against this just like they were against the constitutional carry, and for the same reason. It cuts
Yes.
into their pocketbook.
Exactly. I expect that too. Well, I've put this one on my radar, so I'll try to keep up with it. And then as we talk each week, we'll see where it is. And just watch how it goes along. And I do think the opposition will come from where you just said it would come from.
Right. And unfortunately, I
Yeah.
think that's something that we're going to deal with anytime getting a permit is either going to be made easier or less expensive. The Sheriff's Association, I think, is probably going to oppose it, unfortunately.
Yeah. I agree.
So this one's somewhat off topic because it's not obviously something that the legislature is going to be considering, but I know it's something that you have a passion for and that we've talked about on this program before. Of course, Amendment 1 is going to be our statewide ballot. So,
Yay, I'm so glad you brought it up.
says we think along the same lines, apparently.
Yes.
So I just wanted to ask your take on that and sort of give a brief primer to the people who may either have forgotten it since it actually wound up going through the legislature, because I know Kay Ivey has been campaigning hardcore for this here recently.
Yes,
And so
yes.
help explain to our audience exactly what that is and why they should what they should consider when considering how to vote on it.
Okay, so for all of you out there, turn up your radio because this is the one big takeaway you need from this show tonight, and that is to vote no on Amendment 1. It will take away your right to vote for your school board member, and will put that now in the hands of the governor. She will be able to appoint the school board members. No longer will you have a say in this. Now, what's funny, when we started having a school board way back in the days when we first, started having school boards, they used to be appointed. And they were so unresponsive to the people that in 1970, they said, oh, we've got to get rid of this. We need to go to an elected board. We need people who are going to be accountable to the public. And so it became an elected board. Well, now they're saying we have such horrible scores and everything is so bad because we have this dysfunctional school board. We need to go back to being appointed. Well, y'all, that is not the reason why we're doing so poorly in education. But I don't know about you, but I want my right to vote for my school board member. But the other important part of why you need to vote no is the language in the actual bill that will go into the Constitution requires that we ensure, that our standards, our math and our language reading standards ensure nationwide consistency and the seamless transfer of students from within and outside of the state in lieu of Common Core. So they're basically saying, we're going to get rid of Common Core, but we're going to have these standards that go from state to state. Mm-hmm. Well, the trick is Common Core are the only standards that are national standards that go from state to state. So we'll be enshrining in our Constitution that we will have to have national standards. And that should not be in our Constitution. We should not tie our hands. And so it's an easy vote. And that's just to vote no.
Well, and that's the thing. This is what just absolutely drives me up a wall is, and I don't want to get off on my entire lecture on incorporationalism, but the whole point of having 50 different states is that we get to make our own decisions on things like this. Mm-hmm. We're not an affiliate of the federal government. Remember, the states created the federal government, not the other way around. Mm-hmm. And so on this, I do not understand that, we're saying as small government constitutionalists that make up the majority of Alabama, we want our school board members to be less accountable to us and be accountable to the governor, whomever that may be. And then secondly, we don't even want to have the freedom to choose our own curriculum. We're going to basically say we're going to make ourselves an affiliate of the national education system, and whatever the federal government says is the national education standards, that's automatically going to become whatever it is for the state of Alabama. I do not understand the thought process that somebody can go to and go, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's run with that.
Right. Well, they're trying to trick people with their language to say, oh, if you hate Common Core, then you need to vote yes. This is going to get rid of Common Core. It's the exact opposite. It is going to make us have national standards, and the only national standards there are right now is Common Core.
Yeah, I mean, to help people understand exactly how insane this is, maybe to help illustrate with a metaphor, it would be almost like saying, what we're going to do is we don't like the gun standards at the national level, and we don't want the federal gun laws to be Alabama's gun laws. So what we're going to do is we're going to enshrine in our Constitution that whatever the federal government decides on gun laws, those are going to be our gun laws here in the state of Alabama. It's like, no, you're just saying we're going to replace the federal gun laws that we adopted with whatever the national standard is, and that national standard is the federal gun law. So
that's right.
You're moving to exactly the same place. You're just doing it in a different way.
Yes, and tricking people to get there.
Right, saying that, this actually abolishes the standards we have now. Exactly. Yes, but you're abolishing the standards we have now to adopt whatever the national standard is in the future.
Which is what we have now.
Right now is what we have now. So...
Yes. So, yes, I'm so glad you brought up Amendment 1. And each week we talk between now and the vote in early March. Let's be sure we touch on that so people who might miss an episode will remember.
I hope so, Becky. And I love my state and I love the people of Alabama. And in a lot of ways, I think this is the greatest state in the country to live in. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that constantly annoys me about the people of Alabama is it seems like if it winds up on the ballot, it's going to pass, no matter what it is. And that just drives me absolutely up a wall, and it's going to be a very uphill battle to get this thing to fail.
Yeah, I'm hoping. When people really realize it's going to take their vote away, that's usually enough for them to vote no. But with so much from the governor's office and the money behind the commercials that you will begin seeing, it is going to be hard to kill. So
it is.
Word of mouth is going to, what we need to rely on right now.
Right. And so as much as we appreciate you listening to this program and other programs like us, or, if you're somebody that gets the Eagle Forum Alabama newsletter or whatever else, we appreciate that. Please tell your neighbors, because it's not going to do a whole lot of good if it's just you that knows about it.
Right. And Caleb, that reminds me, for everyone out there who is not on our alert list, alabamaeagle.org is where you can go. And during the legislative session, I send out an email every week, once a week, just updating on where we are on these bills, where they are in the process. If there's an action like you need to call, your representative and ask them to vote no or whatever, you can kind of keep track of these bills as well. So alabamaeagle.org, at the top, you'll see something that says get active, or click on that tab and you'll see sign up for our emails.
All right, great. Well, that's actually a good segue into wrapping this up. Is there anything else you want to let us know about before we let you go for the day?
That is all I can think about for now. I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about next week.
Oh, I'm sure that in the following weeks that we're going to be doing good to cram all of this into 30 minutes. But, this is just kind of the precursor, the primer for the legislative session. But thank you so much, as always, Becky Gerritson of Eagle Forum, Alabama. Thank you for making time for us.
You bet. Thank you so much. I'll see you next week.
All right. Have a good one. As we said, that was Becky Gerritson of Eagle Forum, Alabama, and we will be right back in just a minute.
And now for a reading from the Social Justice Warrior Bible with Pastor Gregory Post.
Welcome in. I'm Gregory Post, head pastor at the Eternal Living Word Trans-Denominational Community Church and Coffee House in Novato, California. And now for a reading from the SJW Bible. Today's reading will be from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 7, verses 2 through 10. And a centurion's slave was sick and about to die. When he had heard about Jesus, he sent some Jewish elders asking him to come save the life of his slave. When they came to Jesus, they earnestly implored him, saying, "He is worthy for you to grant this to him, for he loves our nation, and it was he who built our synagogue." Now Jesus was triggered upon hearing this and said, "None of the good things he has done matter, because he is a slave owner, and we must never admit that anyone that ever owned slaves is capable of doing anything good. Furthermore, instead of asking me for help, you should have passed universal health care by now so that he could receive treatment for free." Then Jesus started on his way with them, and when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying, "Lord, do not trouble yourself further, for I am not worthy for you to come under my roof. For this reason I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I am also a man placed under authority, with soldiers under me, and I say to this one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my slave, do this, and he does it." Now when Jesus heard this, he marveled at him, and turned and said to the crowd that was following him, "I say to you, this man is engaged in systematic oppression. He is clearly engaging in wage slavery by controlling the means of production to exploit the labor of those around him." Then Jesus gathered up a mob and protested on the centurion's lawn all night long with torches and signs reading, "Down with the patriarchy," terrifying him and his family. We never really found out what happened to the centurion's slave. Wow. So inspiring. Thank you for listening to this reading of the SJW Bible. And remember, the only truth that matters is your truth.
And welcome back, everybody. So thank you so much for being with us here on Tactics, regardless of where you're listening to us. Like I said, this is the first broadcast we've had on Mixer, so hopefully we've got a big audience there on Mixer. Hello to everybody that's watching us on our new venue there. And everybody that may be listening to us traditionally on News Radio 1440, living it up old school. It's hard to even find an AM radio now. So we appreciate you no matter how you are listening to us. We always appreciate all of our listeners and any of the feedback that we get, which of course you can always do at Tactics Radio on Twitter. You can always email me, tacticsradio@gmail.com. There's a myriad of ways to get in touch with me, so we love hearing from you. If you have any comments, questions, criticisms, if you don't like me, you can tell me. That's always an option. Now, speaking of people not liking other people, we are going to talk about something that happened earlier this week with the impeachment trial, specifically as it relates to, as always, local news takes priority here at Tactics. Doug Jones, because he did, of course, vote in favor of conviction like every other Democrat, every single one. And with the exception of Mitt Romney, every single one voted to acquit. And Mitt Romney even voted to acquit on the second charge, the obstruction of Congress, which, as I've explained many times, is a bogus charge. But on both counts, Doug Jones voted to convict the President of the United States and remove him from office. This is a surprise to nobody. Not a single person within the sound of my voice should be surprised. Whether you saw that I had predicted exactly this or not, and I even predicted that he was going to vote to convict on both counts, this is a surprise to no one. And as I predicted, I think that this is the reason that Doug Jones did this, because Doug Jones saw that poll just like you and I did. He knows that doing this hurts his chances at getting reelected. Here is why he opted to do it. Doug Jones, regardless of what he'll try to tell you, and it was obviously political posturing, and his explanation of why he voted that way will prove that, and we'll look at that in just a second. But what really happened here is Doug Jones is hedging his bets. Because he knows, for a fact, it is already basically a predetermined conclusion he is going to lose this election. You can tell by the way that he hasn't really been hitting the campaign trail very hard. You can tell by he hasn't bought that many ads. I don't know that he's bought any ads within the state of Alabama. The vast majority of his advertising is through social media, and he does so for fundraising, and the vast majority of those ads are played outside the state of Alabama. Doug Jones, so far as I can tell, has absolutely zero intention of getting reelected. I mean, he'd like to get reelected probably. He'd like to hold on to his Senate seat, but he knows that the odds of that are so astronomically minuscule that there's no reason really for him to put in a lot of effort to it. And the reason that he wouldn't vote to not convict Trump, to be the lone Democrat that voted to acquit the president, is he knows that, yeah, it's going to hurt his chances at reelection, but this is probably a choice between losing by, I don't know, maybe 10% and losing by 25%. Like, it's just that drastic. So, yeah, maybe he loses by a wider margin. Big deal. You still lost the seat. And I think he knows that. I think his political advisors know that. And I think what's actually going on here is that Doug Jones is bucking for a position, either with the National Democrat Party at the DNC or maybe a bigger position within the Democrat Party here in the state of Alabama. I think he's going, because of the way that he's been with the Democrat Party of Alabama and the way that there's a lot of people that are in power there that really don't like him. I think that he's going to be bucking for a job with the National Democrat Party, the DNC, or maybe as a lobbyist or somebody in the media. I doubt media because, and keep in mind, I'm saying this as somebody who has a radio face. He doesn't really look the part for somebody in media. And I get when your competition would be Brian Stelter, that it's not exactly fierce competition, but how you look does matter when it comes to being on TV, especially a cable news channel. So I tend to think that he's probably leaning more towards either the lobbyist side or being in the DNC. Either way, he has a far, far better chance at landing a job like that if he votes to convict Trump than he does voting to acquit. And since he knows that he's probably going to lose the election anyway, and he's going to have to move on to something else afterward, and he has aspirations, I think, to do that after he's no longer a senator, I think he was hedging his bets and saying it's a much safer bet to vote to convict the president, and then voting to acquit the president isn't on my record when I have to explain that I am really loyal to the Democrat cause, and that's why I should be working with the DNC, because I feel like that would be an unforgivable sin to them. And so because of that, I think that that's the reason, that was part of the calculation in Doug Jones choosing to vote to convict the president. Because I think he, like the rest of the country, knew there was no way Trump was going to get convicted, and so Doug Jones' vote didn't make a difference one way or the other, and he knew that. And so if that is the case and the end result is going to be the same, you have to ask, what is the X factor that makes him change his mind? I think that is a perfect explanation of why he would choose to vote to convict Trump when he's coming up for re-election very shortly. I think that that makes perfect sense. It explains everything else. It makes all of the pieces fall into place. But regardless of what his actual motivation is, we do have Doug Jones on camera, on national TV, explaining to everyone why he is voting to convict the president, and so I thought it only fair to let Doug Jones speak for himself and play him in his own words. Now, I am going to respond to this, of course, but I think it's fair to let Doug Jones at least tell you why he voted the way that he did. Here's his explanation.
As I've said many times, I believe the American people deserve to see a completed puzzle, a picture with all of the pieces in the form of documents and witnesses with relevant firsthand information, which would have provided valuable context, corroboration, or contradiction to that which we have heard. But even with missing pieces, our common sense and life's experiences allow us to see the picture as it comes into full view.
Now, to be fair to Senator Jones, this is one thing where, even though I think we have different motivation for it, he and I are actually in agreement. I know, before you throw things at your computer screen and break your fancy new computer, stay with me here. There is a good reason. He and I have different motives, but arrive at the same conclusion. As I said on this program for weeks on end, it is in the Senate's best interest, it is in the Republicans' best interest, and I believe it is in Trump's best interest that witnesses be had, there is a real trial, and we put this thing to rest for once and for all, and that there is no call of, oh, there was a cover-up, or they refused to hear witnesses. I think give the Democrats what they want, have a bipartisan exchange there, have them present their witnesses, us present theirs, because here's the thing. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid even in the least. When you have the facts on your side, and here's the thing, even if it turns out we didn't have the facts on the side, let's say that the Democrat fantasy that they had been pushing all this time actually came true, and there was some kind of bombshell witness that said, oh yeah, President Trump was totally soliciting the investigation in Ukraine specifically. He told me, he's like, look, we got to get this Joe Biden guy. I think that he might actually be able to get me. So he might be able to beat me in this election. So what you have to do is you have to dig up some dirt on him. And I want you to tell them that they are not getting that money until you've dug up some dirt on them. Well, yeah, that could have happened. I don't foresee it happening. I never thought that that was the case. But even if that had taken place, I'd say, hey, let the chips fall where they may. To me, that was the most important thing. I don't think that was going to happen. I do care about getting down to the truth. And I thought what was going to happen is that once we did, it was going to make the Democrats look even more ridiculous for holding the beliefs that they did and dragging this thing out and actually impeaching a sitting president on a basis of no evidence. I thought that that could only help the Republicans. And let's say that that did happen, and that there actually was some kind of bombshell witness that showed that Trump absolutely crossed the line and created a quid pro quo specifically to suit his interest, and he actually stated that as the motivation. Let's say that that happened. Well, then, maybe some people do cross the line and actually do vote Trump out of office. That's okay too. Let the chips fall where they may, even though every single road sign that we had seen up to this point said that the chips falling where they may is going to end in the president proving his innocence. So, on some level, Doug Jones and I are actually on the same page there. I do want a more complete picture. I do want to see all the pieces, including getting Hunter Biden on the stand to testify, including getting people like John Bolton on the stand to testify, including getting our ambassador, a myriad of other people, and get down to the bottom of what happened in Ukraine and actually explain what all happened, including the shady ties with the Bidens, with them, with the Chinese, everything. I want to get it all out in the open, all out in the sunlight. And if some Republicans get thumped, so be it. If some Democrats get thumped, so be it. That's what justice looks like. You don't care about the labels, you get down to the bottom of it. So, on an ideological standpoint, Doug Jones and I are actually in the same part. Here's where Doug Jones goes wildly off the rails, though. He makes the case, and it's an incredibly stupid self-contradictory case that the Democrats have been making for a couple weeks now. When they're talking about the necessity of having witnesses, they'll say, okay, What we need is, like Doug Jones just said, we need more pieces. We don't have all the pieces. We don't have a complete picture. We need to piece this thing together so we know what to do. Also, even though we don't have all the pieces, let's convict him anyway. Okay, well, those two things cannot be true at the same time. Either you have enough pieces to make up your mind, you have enough pieces to say, yep, Trump did it. Let's convict him. Or we don't know. We don't have enough pieces. Those two things cannot be true at the same time. You cannot say there is not enough evidence here, and we need witnesses, we need documents, we need to dig into this further, and simultaneously say, but we do have all we need to know that Trump was guilty. I'm sorry, it simply doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way in any court of law. If you have enough evidence to convict, then the prosecution rests. There's no reason to go any further. There's no reason to dig any deeper. If you've already got the information you need, you run with it. The Democrats are trying to have their cake and eat it too, and Doug Jones is just an example of this. They're trying to say, no, we didn't have enough. There wasn't enough there. And also at the same time, but there was plenty to convict. See, that's because Doug Jones and the rest of the Democrats, their default was that the president is guilty. He is guilty until proven innocent. Until we can see evidence that says, nope, Trump didn't do it, which you can't prove a negative, that's a logical fallacy. Until we see evidence that says Trump didn't do it, this absolutely didn't happen, then we're going to vote to convict and remove him from office because we don't like the guy. See, Doug Jones, being a lawyer, should know better. He should look at this and say, you know what, it's terrible that we didn't get more witnesses. It's terrible that we didn't have all the pieces to the puzzle. It's terrible that the Republicans were keeping us from getting all the evidence. And in the lack of all that evidence, I have to vote to acquit because I don't have all the information that I need to make a decision. That's how it works in a court of law. If you had some kind of inability to find evidence, if your verdict is not guilty, it can be decided that you are not guilty because of a lack of evidence. Because in the court system in America, the way that it is supposed to work is that you are innocent until they can prove that you are guilty. This was the opposite. Doug Jones made it up in his mind already. The president is already guilty. There's not enough evidence there? Okay, well, I'm just going to go with my default. It shows that he jettisoned every single legal standard that a lawyer should understand in order to push a political agenda. And it's shameful that Doug Jones, somebody that actually has studied the law, should know this and completely ignored it. So here's the next clip from Senator Jones.
Throughout the trial, one piece of evidence continued to stand out for me. It was the president's statement that under the Constitution, we have Article 2 and I can do anything I want. That seems to capture this president's belief about the presidency, that he has unbridled power, unchecked by Congress or the judiciary or anyone else. That view, dangerous as it is, explains the president's actions toward Ukraine and Congress.
Now, here Doug Jones is absolutely stretching for anything that he can do to justify why he just threw out every single legal principle he's supposed to stand for to convict a president that he says there's not enough evidence on. And what he does, the vehicle that he chooses to do that, is that Trump has said before, well, I have Article 2 under the Constitution, which means I can do whatever I want. This point has three major flaws. The first flaw is that when Donald Trump said that, and he did say it multiple times on national TV, on record, there's recordings of him, but every single time he said it, every single one, what he was talking about was Robert Mueller. What he was saying when people asked him about whether or not he was going to fire Robert Mueller, he said, no, I'm not going to fire him, but under Article 2 of the Constitution, if I did fire him, I would be well within my right as the president to do that. I can do whatever I want when it comes to the special counsel. He is correct. The special counsel is an extension of the executive branch. And so everything that Trump is saying within the context of that is correct. But that had nothing to do with Ukraine. Nothing. So the piece of evidence, as Doug Jones calls it, that kept sticking out to him is Donald Trump commenting on an unrelated matter long before the Ukraine call even happened. Not just before news of the Ukraine call came out, literally before the Ukraine call took place. By about a year, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe a little less than a year. I think that he said that in August about Mueller, and then the Ukraine call happened in July of the next year. So a little less than a year, if I've got my timeline correct on that. Double check me on that in case you're wondering, because I'm not 100% sure on that. But I'm pretty sure it was, the phone call happened in July, the year after Trump said that. But anyway, so that's the big thing, that when Trump said that, he wasn't even talking about the Ukraine. It was completely unrelated to what was going on in Ukraine. None of these charges, neither of the two that were brought up, whether it was obstruction of Congress or the abuse of power, neither of those things had anything to do with Ukraine. Neither of those things had anything to do with the Mueller report. And so this is Trump talking on a completely different topic. What he was saying had nothing to do with this. The second flaw is that Trump was speaking specifically about Article 2 powers over the special counsel. So this is why that argument bears no weight in this particular discussion. You cannot take something that somebody said completely out of context and assume that they were applying it to something that they were not applying it to. That would be almost like if somebody had accused me of, bribery or extortion or embezzlement when it comes to News Radio 1440. Let's say that were the case, that somebody was accusing me of embezzling money from News Radio 1440, and their evidence to show that I was capable of doing that I had thought about doing that before, is they took a recording of me when I had my producer. Let's say it was back when I had one of my producers, and they said, I wish you wouldn't pick that song to come back from a commercial break. And I'd say, hey, it's my show. I can do what I want. Oh, see, that's him on the air saying that Caleb thinks he can do whatever he wants. Well, yeah, in regards to the show, in regards to picking my own bumper music, I'm saying that. That's not the same thing as saying that I can do whatever I want and therefore I can embezzle. You're applying something that I said completely out of context to a subject matter that is in no way connected to what we were talking about here. And Doug Jones knows that. He's intentionally taking the president's words out of context to try to make him look bad. But that's not what President Trump said at all. That wasn't even pertaining to that topic. And the third reason that his argument here makes absolutely no sense is talking about doing something and then actually doing it are two completely different things. And in this case, it wasn't even specific. So to go back to my embezzlement example, that would be like saying, oh, well, what Caleb said there about he can do what he wants means that he would embezzle. Well, I wasn't talking specifically about embezzling. Now, if you had a clip of me saying, hey, I should be able to embezzle because I can do what I want, okay, maybe you have a point. That at the very least shows that I had thought about it at one point, but that's not what even's going on here. Even if it was, though, there's a difference in saying you would be capable of doing something or that you think you have permission to do something and then actually doing it. You would still, to convict the president, need evidence that he actually did the thing, not just that he talked about it. And so, again, Doug Jones is a lawyer and should understand all of these things, and yet he intentionally misunderstands the president, rips his quotes out of context to try to make the man look bad. Let's look at the third and final clip in this little speech by Senator Jones.
The sum of what we've seen and heard is, unfortunately, a picture of a president who has abused the great power of his office for personal gain. A picture of a president who has placed his personal interest well above the interest of the nation, and in so doing, threatened our national security, the security of our European allies, and the security of Ukraine. The evidence clearly proves that the president used the weight of his office and the weight of the United States government to seek to coerce a foreign government to interfere in our election for his personal political benefit. His actions were more than simply inappropriate. They were an abuse of power. Sadly, President Trump left his post with regard to the withholding of military aid to Ukraine and a White House visit for the new Ukrainian president. And in so doing, he took the great powers of the office of the President of the United States with him. Impeachment is the only check on such presidential wrongdoing.
Now, what Doug Jones is saying here could not be further from the truth. The evidence is not clear. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the evidence is absolutely crystal clear, because it's not. Because a lot of people on the right will tell you that the evidence is clear that the president did nothing wrong. Or that at the very least that the president's motives were not what the Democrats claim his motives were, which is, of course, to get one up on a political opponent. The evidence is not clear on that. It's possible that in the back of Trump's mind, he was thinking, okay, I've got to root out this corruption, and if it winds up smacking Joe Biden and keeping him from looking good on the national stage because he might be the guy I'm running against, well, that's a plus. I don't know. Maybe the president was thinking about that. It doesn't matter. Because as long as he was acting in the national interest, it doesn't matter if he had an ulterior motive. As long as he was acting within his capacity as the president and doing so in a way that served the national interest, in other words, doing his job as president, to look into things like this as America's top law enforcement official, the person that's supposed to be looking into these matters, as long as he was doing that within that purview, then even if he did have bad motives, still not illegal. The only way you could prove that what he was doing was wrong is if you did have a soundbite of the president saying that the reason he was doing it was because he was trying to get a leg up on the election, and you had to prove that Trump knew, not that it was true, just that Trump knew that it wasn't going to be something in the national interest. If you could somehow prove that, then yeah, you might have a case, but none of that is true. The evidence is anything but clear. It's incredibly murky. And because of that, because there is an absence of crystal clear evidence, well, then you have to let the guy go. You have to say that there is not sufficient evidence to convict somebody in this case. That would be true of a lowly petty crime or the president of the United States. Everybody should be equal under that standard of innocent until proven guilty. And another thing that makes it so murky as to whether or not that was actually the president's motive is even the witnesses that were called in the House, every single one of them that said that they believed the president was doing this as a way to get one up on Joe Biden, one up on a political opponent for the upcoming election, every single one admitted in their testimony that that was how they perceived it. It was conjecture. It was speculation. Not a single one could provide an example of President Trump telling them directly that this is my motive, this is my reason for doing this. I'm not saying there aren't things in that testimony that make the president look bad. I'm not saying that there aren't things in that testimony that could lead you to believe that that was Trump's motivation for it. But whether or not it could lead you to that belief, there's a difference in doing that and proving it, which should be the standard when you're talking about something as serious as impeachment. Look, Jones and his followers, they can talk all they want about him being a moderate, but what you just saw in real time is Senator Doug Jones throwing everything that he knows, everything that he claims to hold dear about the law, threw all that out the window to fall in line and walk lockstep with Chuck Schumer and the Democrat Party. The guy is the epitome of partisanship. And anybody that tries to tell you differently is simply not paying attention. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on. Let's see what we've got here. I think it's actually time for the Daily Dose of Stupid.
No, you messed it up. You're stupid.
All right, and for today's Daily Dose of Stupid, my fraternity brother is making me laugh here in the comment section talking about my sensual voice. Well, thank you, Jager, if I appreciate it. My voice has that effect on men. Anyway, let's talk about somebody else that has a sensual voice here for a second, and I am, of course, referring to the godfather of radio, Rush Limbaugh. So, for those of you that haven't been paying attention or been living under a rock, Rush Limbaugh, who, by the way, appears from 11 to 2 on News Radio 1440, so he's also a host on News Radio 1440. You can listen to him weekdays right there on our terrestrial signal. Rush, of course, received the Presidential Medal of Honor, a huge honor for anybody receiving it, regardless of what president you get it from, regardless of when it takes place or why. I mean, that's getting the highest civilian award from our federal government is a big accomplishment no matter who you are. And this happens in the wake of Rush announcing that he has late-stage lung cancer. As a cancer survivor myself, I have done a little bit of research on other cancers. I, of course, had testicular cancer. Rush has lung cancer. The thing about lung cancer is it's very survivable. And if you catch it early, stage 1 or 2 usually, then you pretty much got it whipped. Because it's easier to cure. But the thing that makes lung cancer tricky is that there's so many blood vessels in the lungs, because every single blood vessel has to go through the lungs, of course, to get oxidized. That's how we live. And because of that, and because there is such a readily available system of transportation when it comes to the body, because of that, lung cancer spreads real quick. And if you get it late stage, it's very hard to get rid of it. And so while Rush is very hopeful and he's got the best doctors, and I know that there's a lot of people that are really holding out hope that Rush, pulls through, and God knows I'm praying for him as well. This is very serious. And so with that, Rush actually received the Presidential Medal of Freedom at the State of the Union on Tuesday. If you were watching our live stream coverage of it, we talked about it in real time as it happened, but there was some commentary that the left has given that they have just absolutely lost their minds over this. And this is something that was really cool that I wanted to share with you as well. We actually had a fan of the show that sketched this. This is a portrait of the godfather of radio, Rush Limbaugh himself, the man with the golden microphone. And I think that this is really awesome. This was just a fan, somebody that listens to News Radio 1440, got in touch with us on the Facebook page earlier today, facebook.com/News Radio 1440, and asked if we would talk about it and bring it up. And so if you do want to see that picture is up on News Radio 1440. You can share it if you want to. And done by a guy named Colin Hayes, and you can check out more of his work at colinhayesart.com. I just thought that was really cool. A Montgomery listener, a guy right here in this area, such a big Rush fan, decided that he was going to go ahead and promote that through us. So, I mean, really cool. But this is the clip of Rush actually getting it out. I want you to pay close attention to Rush's reaction and the reactions of the people there in the crowd. This is Rush receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Here tonight is a special man, beloved by millions of Americans, who just received a stage 4 advanced cancer diagnosis. This is not good news, but what is good news is that he is the greatest fighter and winner that you will ever meet. Rush Limbaugh, thank you for your decades of tireless devotion to our country. And Rush, in recognition of all that you have done for our nation, the millions of people a day that you speak to and that you inspire, and all of the incredible work that you have done for charity, I am proud to announce tonight that you will be receiving our country's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
I mean, you can tell there, he is just absolutely floored. He was not expecting that at
all. I will now ask the First Lady of the United States to present you with the honor, please.
I mean, he's just beside himself. You can tell by his reaction. And the thing about Rush is, and I'm going off of the testimony of people that know him well, not like me, because I've never actually met the man, but typically he's a guy that's just so buttoned up and has it together, and you can tell watching the show that he's like that, doesn't show a whole lot of emotion, but man, he is just overwhelmed. And that's appropriate, because he means so much to so many people. Now, the thing that is really great about that moment is just how astounded he is and how overwhelmed he is. Because, I mean, this is a guy that just got pretty much the worst news that any single person can ever get. And I know because I've gotten the news before. I've been in his shoes. And granted, his news is actually a little bit worse than mine, because even at the start of mine, we were pretty sure that we were able to get it in time. I had late-term testicular cancer, but that's far less dangerous than late-term lung cancer. And just to receive an honor like that, to get a boon like that after you've had no telling how much time alone thinking about, what could happen. And like I said, I've been in his shoes. That's got to be such an incredible moment for you. This is a guy that, even if you hate him, even if you can't stand his opinions, this is a guy that, even if you disagree with him, he believes he's doing the right thing for America. He loves this country. And to see that happen for him is a great moment. And it just drives me nuts that the Democrats couldn't even applaud that. I get it. You don't like the guy. That's fine. But if the exact same thing had happened to, I don't know, Chris Matthews or Rachel Maddow or one of the other big names over on the left, especially after they get the news that they have late-term cancer, this is where the Daily Dose of Stupid comes in. How can you even if you were just doing it for the selfish reason of you didn't want to look bad on TV, how do you not applaud that? I mean, do you really, really hate the president and Rush Limbaugh so much that you can't even do that and acknowledge that that's a great moment for somebody that is going through a tremendous amount of stress and turmoil at his life at that time? I don't understand that mentality. I just don't. And the thing about Rush is, even if you don't agree with his message, even if you don't like his style, whatever it is, there's a reason he's called the Godfather of radio. This man basically invented an entire genre of radio entertainment by himself. Nobody had ever done the politics opinion news talk show, and now there's whole stations like News Radio 1440 that run nothing but that. Rush Limbaugh basically single-handedly saved AM radio. And that's an accomplishment. That's something that is huge for millions of people, not just that listen to him, but people like me that have a career because of Rush Limbaugh. In the same way that Jeff Foxworthy and Bill Engvall and some of the other country comedians, guys like John Reap, Larry the Cable Guy, they all have a job because of Jerry Clower. Jerry Clower is the forerunner. He's the first country comedian. He was the first guy that carved out a genre of people that wanted that particular product. That's who Rush Limbaugh is to talk radio. And so he's an industry leader and a innovator, even if you don't like the content that he puts out there. I mean, he is as instrumental to talk radio as Casey Kasem was to the Top 40 format. Casey Kasem basically invented America's Top 40. And because of that, the Top 40 format that radio stations have, which, by the way, even we own one, that's Y102, our sister station, every single one owes him a debt of gratitude for that. In the same way that every single superhero owes a debt of gratitude to Superman, because Superman was the first one. That's the alpha, that's the origin. And so somebody that just has a hard time seeing the importance of that, it just blows my mind that they despise him and despise his opinion that much. Rush isn't my favorite talk show host. I like him. I find him incredibly entertaining, and I have insane levels of respect for him, as you can probably tell from this segment. But if given the choice between him and a couple of others, there's at least 2 or 3 that I would take over listening to him if given the option. There's some issues I really want to hear Rush's opinion on. But you know what I'm saying. Regardless of whether or not he's your favorite or not, he's still the godfather for a reason. He's still the reason that this industry even exists. And there's some people that just cannot get on board with that because of their utter hatred for the president and for anybody that espouses an even somewhat conservative view. And so one such person, and it's no surprising this is a media hack, Jennifer Rubin of the Washington Post, tweeted this out. I hope I have the right graphic here. There we go. So Jennifer Rubin saying, this is a national disgrace that a birther, a racist, and a misogynist is getting this award. Why not give it to David Duke? Now, what's hilarious to me is that this is a person that claims to be a conservative opinion columnist. Now, Jennifer Rubin hasn't written anything remotely conservative in the past 10 years, but she refers to herself as a conservative opinion writer. And you could be a conservative and not be a Trump fan. There's a lot of us out there. There's some days where I'm not a Trump fan and I'm a conservative. But, I mean, look at the way that she points this out. It's like every single liberal talking point consolidated into one tweet. And I think that a great way to look at this is it's everything wrong with the media and their treatment of people like Rush Limbaugh and like Donald Trump. First of all, everybody that I disagree with is a Klan member. Everybody that I disagree with, they're a white supremacist. Everyone I disagree with, they're a Nazi. There is absolutely no sense of decorum or tact or, I don't know, perspective when it comes to these kinds of things. You can't think, maybe the guy that, I don't know, like Rush Limbaugh, happens to be against busing because he thinks it's economically stupid, it wastes taxpayer money, and by the way, he thinks that it actually hurts the minority children that it's supposed to be helping. Maybe he's not the same as David Duke. It's so devoid of self-reflection, and that's one of the things that gets under my skin about it. But another thing that, again, it's just everything wrong with the media. It's basically the idea that Trump can do absolutely nothing good. No matter what President Trump does, it's always wrong. Even if it's doing something that is an incredibly nice, magnanimous gesture like this for a man that is literally dying, and there's a decent chance, and I wish the best for him. I'm not trying to be morbid, but just to emphasize my point, there's at least a pretty good chance that Rush isn't with us for another year. And everything he's been through in his career and everything, and now you're seeing Trump do this as a friend and somebody that cares about Rush and somebody that has millions of listeners every day. No, he's just like David Duke. Nothing that Trump does is good. Not a single thing. This was just terrible. Can you not step back and kind of try to look at it with different eyes for a second? And then finally, one more thing that the media constantly does, and again, she's just an example of it, is that my outrage justifies whatever nasty thing I do or whatever nasty thing that I say. See, I'm so personally outraged by it that it doesn't matter that I'm attacking somebody that maybe could use at least a little encouragement at this point, or maybe at the very least say the timing's bad, I'll hold off and hold on to my outrage and maybe talk about that a little bit later. Can't do that. All we know is we don't like that guy. Destroy. I mean, can you not muster up at least a little compassion? A little self-reflection? But we all know that that's not what the mainstream media does. And as if that weren't enough, this is a second tweet on the matter by Jennifer Rubin, where she says, "Thank you. Award this to a blatant homophobe, racist, misogynist, etc. is a disgrace to both the media, and both the media and the Dems are playing defense on tearing up a lie-filled speech." Now, I don't want to get into the whole tearing up the speech thing. I think people are up in arms about it. Yes, it's dumb. Yes, it makes Nancy Pelosi look childish. That's fine. Let her look childish. There's no reason for you to pile on. Just having somebody watch that themselves, it does all the work for you. There's no reason to try to convince people that that was the wrong thing to do. Like, we don't have to talk for 2 or 3 days about it. But at the same time, what she's saying, really, you want to compare the two. You want to compare giving a guy like Rush Limbaugh this award, you want to say that that's so much worse. That's so much worse than tearing up a lie-filled speech. Well, whether or not you agree that the speech was truthful or not really has no bearing on it. It was a childish, dumb thing to do. And the fact that the Democrats are now rushing to Nancy Pelosi's defense, you can be a good Democrat and still say, yeah, maybe that wasn't the best thing for Pelosi to do, if nothing else, just because it looked bad, or it made her look bad, or it made her look petty and small. But no, they must always defend it because, of course, Pelosi is one of their own, and they must always defend everything a Democrat does. This is where we've gotten to where we're all just playing on a team. And we throw on that jersey, and when we throw on that jersey, everything that our guys does is right and good, and everything that the other side does is terrible and wrong and evil. This hyperpartisanship just drives me absolutely crazy. And here's another thing that we're talking about. You want to talk about a disgrace? You want to talk about this award going to somebody who's a misogynist? Well, I tend to remember that President Obama gave the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Tom Brokaw, who has been accused of sexual molestation, and Bill Clinton, who's been accused of sexual molestation and rape several times. And we know from DNA evidence that he did abuse his power and actually force an intern to have sex with him in the Oval Office. But that's not a misogynist, right? I mean, yeah, Rush is. He's never actually got, anything like that happen. But somehow he's the misogynist and Bill Clinton's not. And oh yeah, let's not forget that Obama also awarded that medal to Ted Kennedy. And a woman actually died because he was trying to hide his affair with her. Left her for dead in the car because he's a coward. And you didn't have a problem when President Obama gave the medal to him. So that's the standard we're going with now, apparently. And I heard so many leftists, and it drives me up a wall, say, well, this degrades the integrity of the award. President Trump is going to give it to somebody out there in the media, a performer, and somebody that, doesn't even deserve it. They're saying that this brings down the integrity in the award. First of all, the award has always been sort of a presidential perk. That's what it's always been. You just give it to people that you like. So let's tone down the fake outrage here, people on the left. Because I also remember him giving it, President Obama did, to Ellen DeGeneres, Stevie Wonder, Tom Hanks, Bruce Springsteen, Oprah. Now, I actually like Springsteen's music. I think it's a little overrated, but I do actually like several songs that he's done. I'm a big fan of Stevie Wonder. Love his music. Some of his songs, especially Superstitious, if that comes on the radio, I ain't turning it off. I'm not even getting out of the car, even if I arrive at my destination, until that one's over. So some of these people I like. I don't have a problem with President Obama giving them to some of those people, but let's not pretend that it's this great prestigious honor. It's not like he gave the man a Purple Heart. The Presidential Medal of Freedom has always been a perk that presidents just pass out to people that they like. And that really, I think, is the best way to sum it up. Let's let go of the fake outrage, please. Spare me your righteous indignation. And yeah, I know people on the political right do it too. I think that their righteous indignation over Pelosi tearing up the speech is a little old. Yeah, it was a dumb thing to do. Yeah, it makes her look bad. Whatever. Can we all just move on? Surely there are more important things for us to worry about than that. Let's go to the chaplain's report.
In 1775, the Continental Congress created the Chaplain Corps. Under the command of General George Washington, each soldier was required to attend worship service every Sunday. While other armies advanced on their feet, Washington's troops advanced on their knees. It's time for the Chaplain's Report with Caleb Colquitt on tactics.
Our chaplain's report today does come from the book of 1 Timothy. And to help you understand where Paul is coming from when he writes this, you have to know that Paul and Timothy have a really special relationship. In fact, in one of the letters, Paul refers to him as his son in the faith. So they have sort of a father-son relationship, definitely that of a mentor and a mentee, but really even closer than that. And I think this comes from some of Paul's own writings where he talks about the church being like your own family and treating one another that way. So here we have Paul kind of signing off to Timothy for the first time and giving some parting thoughts, some advice on his way out the door. And I think that when you look at it that way, you really understand why Paul is writing this the way that he did, the reason that it's in the tone that it is. It's an older man that talking to somebody that he views as kind of a son, giving him some life advice before he signs off in his letter. And this particular verse that we're going to look at is from chapter 6, verses 11 through 12. But flee from these things, you man of God, and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, perseverance, and gentleness. Fight the good fight of faith. Take hold of the eternal life to which you were called, and you made the good confession in the presence of many witnesses. Now, when I read this, and especially when I read it in the context in which it's intended, it makes me think of something very specific. There's a show that I'm sure a lot of you, especially most of my millennial audience, will be familiar with called Boy Meets World. And I think it's one of the best shows that was ever made, for a number of reasons. The very last episode, Corey, the main character, and his friends say goodbye to their teacher, Mr. Feeney, because they're going to be moving away and won't see him very much anymore. And they go to their old high school classroom and have this last goodbye with Mr. Feeney. And they ask, Mr. Feeney, you got any advice for us as we're leaving? So in the same way that Paul is talking to Timothy and sort of giving some parting thoughts for how he should live, Mr. Feeney kind of does the same thing here. And he says, dream, try, do good. And Topanga, because she's the straight A student, and she's really good at English, and she's a writer herself, she says, don't you mean do well? And he responds to her, no, I mean do good. And his advice isn't be successful. His advice isn't go out and achieve a lot of things. By saying do good instead of doing well, he's saying go out into the world and do good things. Do things that help each other, that help other people. That's the advice that Mr. Feeney wanted to leave his students with, and it's actually pretty similar to the advice that Paul leaves Timothy here. You want to know why I end every single show with the words, stay the course, friends? It's because, just like you, I'm a pilgrim. And I'm going through this life doing the best that I can, and it's really difficult sometimes. There's always something in your way, always some kind of obstacle, always some kind of unforeseen trouble that comes around the corner that you weren't expecting. And inevitably, what you do comes down to a simple decision. How you handle it comes down to a simple decision. Are you going to do evil or good? And sometimes I make the wrong decision, and I'm sure that all of you do too. But what I'm encouraging you to do, and what I need encouragement in my own life to do, is to remember to do good, to live the righteous life, to do what Paul advises Timothy to do. Fight that good fight. It's not enough to fight. Fighting can be good or bad. You can fight for the right reasons or the wrong reasons. That's not what Paul says. He says, fight the good fight. Remember why you're fighting and what you're fighting for. That's the good fight. There's some fights that are not worth having. There's some fights that it's better to walk away from because you would be on the wrong side. And so his advice is specific, that it has a moral quality to it. And when it all boils down to it, Paul's advice, it's simple. It's not hard to understand, but it's also not easy. Many things are very simple. They're just not easy to do. Run a marathon. Well, that's real simple. You just go until you hit the recommended mileage. That's simple. Doesn't mean it's easy. And the Christian walk is the same kind of thing. But luckily, Paul gives us advice on how to do all of these things, because you'll notice that list that he gives Timothy right before telling him to fight the good fight. That's a pretty good summary of how Christians stay on the right path. Look at it. Pursue righteousness. Why pursue righteousness? Because righteousness doesn't just happen. If you are a righteous person, if you're going to be righteous, there has to be some intentionality behind it. You're not just going to wake up one morning, oh, I'm righteous. No, that doesn't happen. If you're going to live a righteous life, you've got to constantly be fighting for it. You have to constantly monitor it. You have to be honest with yourself, do some self-evaluation and say, okay, this is what I need to do better in the future. This is some things that I can refrain from doing. But the point is, you cannot live a righteous life unless you're pursuing it. If you're just kind of aimlessly wandering, you're not going to find righteousness that way. Godliness. Well, that's pretty simple. Be like God. And Christians, we have it easy. Because when our religion tells us to be godly, we have an actual living flesh and blood example of a God that became a man and lived the perfect human life. We have a template to follow. And if we follow what Paul said in Romans, being conformed to the image of God's Son, we understand that to be godly means to follow in the teachings and the example of Jesus Christ. Again, a concept that's very simple. It's just not easy to do. Faith. You see, to be able to get through these trials that Timothy is about to undergo, Paul understands that faith is going to be central to all of that. Because you have to have faith that your God, his teachings, are there for a reason, and that they're something that is worth pursuing. You have faith that God knows better than you, that his wisdom is better than your wisdom, and because of that, you have faith that your God can get you through those tribulations that are inevitably going to be coming your way. Love. The reason that he includes love here, and of course love is at the center of everything a Christian does, but I think the reason that he specifically puts it here, as it pertains to fighting the good fight, is that if you have love, it is the only force that is strong enough to motivate you to want to fight the good fight. Because if you don't want to do it, you're going to give up on it because it's hard to do. You don't do anything in your life that is difficult that you don't really have a desire and a drive to do. And for a Christian, where that drive should come from is love. Whether it's love for God or love for our fellow man, if we do not have love, we're going to give up on this fight. And so love is that force that drives us and motivates us to fight that good fight and to live the good life. Perseverance. Well, I think this one's obvious. The reason that Paul includes perseverance as something you need to fight the good fight is because this isn't a sprint. It's an obstacle course. And you have no idea what the next obstacle is going to be. It's going to throw you for a loop. And you've got to be able to persevere through it. You have to have the endurance and the will to keep driving forward even when it's not pleasant or when it's something that you don't want to do. I mean, it's easy to be able to sprint across flat terrain. That's not what the Christian life is like. It's not a gentle, breezy walk. It's something that's fraught with danger. There's a reason that Jesus says that the way that leads to hell is wide, and pretty much everybody finds it. The way that leads to heaven is narrow, and few there be that find it. And so because it is an arduous journey, we're going to have perseverance in order to endure it. Gentleness. I'm not sure necessarily why this one is last, but I think that maybe the reason that you talk about gentleness, because that seems like a weird thing to do when you're using the analogy of a fight, right? Gentleness? We're in the middle of a fight. You just gave us the metaphor of being in combat. How can we be gentle in a fight? It makes me think of a specific scene from Smallville. And for those of you who don't know about it, Smallville is a TV series about Superman when he was a teenager. And so it's young Superman, kind of. And there's one great scene, and I think the creators of the show realized that it was a great scene because they actually put it in the theme song. It's one of the things that they used to promote the show. There's the scene where Superman is trying to save some people, and all of a sudden, when he's trying to look for his family and look for his girlfriend, he sees that there's a meteor coming down. There's this big natural disaster that's happened. And there's this little boy that runs back to the car to get the toy, and he doesn't know any better. He doesn't really understand the situation. He's a little fella, maybe like 3 or 4. And what Superman does is he rushes in with his super speed and wraps his arms around the little boy and takes the blow himself. You see, even though he was in a fight, metaphorically, he was gentle. I think the reason Paul includes gentleness at the end of this is to remind us that yes, we're in a fight. We're in combat. We're in situations that are not good for us and that we don't necessarily like a lot of times on this side of eternity. But that's why we need gentleness. We need to remember what we're fighting for. We need to remember that ultimately our fight is to save lives, not only our own, but everybody else's. That the reason we're here on earth is to make sure that we go to heaven, that we live that righteous life, that we fight that good fight, so that we can enter into an eternal reward. And also, we're supposed to be saving as many people as we can here. And so even in the fight metaphor, he's saying, yes, this is going to be a fight to live out the mission of God and bring God's word to other people, but you have to be gentle to do that because you remember, you're not in the fight to knock everybody out, you're in the fight to save souls. And that requires gentleness. Just like a superhero that's coming in to save a little boy that can't save himself. And let's, be real about this. We're a lot less like Superman, and really Jesus is the Superman in this particular metaphor. But we are the ones that are charged to bring the word of God and bring the good message of the gospel to other people. And because of that, we need a level of gentleness when we're in this fight because it reminds us what we're fighting for and the purpose that we've been put on this earth for. And then right after the fight the good fight, in verse 12 there, he says, take hold of eternal life. You see, this whole thing is reminding Timothy to take some intentionality with you when you're going out into this good fight. You have to be aware of yourself. You need to know what you're getting into, and you have to make a choice, purpose your heart to do these things because it's not going to happen by accident. In other words, take hold of that reward that we have been given. Take hold of the eternal life. Is it a free gift? Oh yeah, it's absolutely a free gift. Jesus did all the heavy lifting for us. There is no question about that. Not a single thing we could do, even fighting the good fight, would have any effect if it were not for Jesus Christ. But we still have to take hold of it. We still have to be the ones that say, yes, I will live the life that Jesus asked me to do. His blood redeems my sins, but ultimately I'm the one responsible for making sure that I take advantage of that gift. It's in the same way when we give out tickets to concerts and ball games and different things at the radio station. It's a free gift. You want it. You're getting it through no expense of your own. You still have to come to the station to pick up the tickets. That doesn't mean it's not a free gift. But you still have to take action to take advantage of that gift. And that's really what Paul means by take hold of the eternal life. You see, ultimately we have to remember that we fight the good fight because this is a fight that is worth fighting. We're not in it for the fight itself. We're in it for the reward at the end. And to get as many people as we can in that reward as well. To do as much as we can to show God that we love Him and to obey His will. That is a fight that is worth fighting. It is the good fight. Stay the course, friends. Tactics is a production of News Radio 1440 and Cumulus Media Montgomery. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Cumulus Media or our business partners. Graphics by Jessica Dawson. Video production by Jackson Dean. Broadcast studio provided by Faulkner University. Location studio provided by the Dalraida Church of Christ. Copyright 2020.